is a special announcement. We are heading to RSA conference in San Francisco for our 11th years of coverage, April 28th, May 1st.
And as always, we're bringing you keynotes, conversations with organizers, speakers, industry leaders, plus the latest insights from the world of cybersecurity.
And we'll reconnect with old friends, meet new ones, and of course, we want you and your company to join us.
We have a few spots left for full sponsorship and our on location briefings. You can book yours now at itspmagazine.com/RSAC.
We're going.
And you're coming with us.
Black Cloak provides concierge cybersecurity protection to corporate executives and high net worth individuals to protect against hacking, reputational loss, financial loss, and the impacts of a corporate data breach. Learn more at blackcloak.io.
Hello, everybody. We're back. We are in the usual bar, Bruce. I see the garlic is not here today, but you are in the good old bar where we used to meet all the time.
Yeah, the garlic took off today, kind of rudely. That kind of stinks, but you know.
Kind of stinks.
Yeah.
Also, maybe too young to go in a bar.
I don't know. You know, these garlics these days, you don't know what they're doing.
A fake ID.
Yeah, exactly.
That would take care of it. The bar reference still works for me because it's a carbon, a silicon, and a cell walk into a bar. And today, what they're going to do is, beside, I don't know, drinking, I guess, and saying hi to the bartender, guess they're going to talk about digital immortality and AI or bots relationships. So it's a lot going on there. I can see happening in a bar. I don't know, kind of like the cantina in Star Wars, where instead of aliens, we actually have robots, which there are already there. And I don't want to even think about what's going on there, but that could be the future.
Yeah, you know, speaking of Star Wars, you remember several years ago where there was a bit of a controversy where they had the sort of the Princess Leia character that was digitally created, and you know that was after Carrie Fisher's unfortunate death, and some people were wondering about that, and whether you're going to see like more and more characters or representations of people, kind of forever, and so yeah, that's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question, and actually, what made me think what you just said is in the first ever Star Wars, we see Princess Leia as an hologram coming out from R2D2. So it's kind of like going all the way around. She started as an hologram, and then she ended up making a cameo. With digital AI, which is a big conversation in the Hollywood world. I mean, the old strike a few months ago was all about using of AI and who has the right of an image. So the question here may be, if somebody recreates you or you decide to create an AI character that represent you based on the things that you say, the things that you do, your social media history and everything, is that the big question is that really you or not? So I don't know. How do you feel about that?
I remember watching a comedy sketch or skit, or maybe not a skit, just a stand-up from Norm Macdonald, the comedian, and he was talking about how it used to be that you have maybe one or just a few like yellowing pictures of your great grandparents, and those like are precious things because those are only like kind of record of people in the past. And so you'd say, oh, would you like to see these photos of your great grandparents? And he was joking that in the future is like, you'd be saying, would you like to see these 1,860,000 photos of your grandparents? Because, we're getting increasingly to a point where everything is being documented, basically, right? So, people, there's that whole talk of nowadays, if you're growing up nowadays, it's very different from what it was like before, where, during the awkward times when you're growing up, people could be filming you on their phones, or, you do something very embarrassing in high school. And, all of us have done embarrassing things in high school. That gets immortalized. And then it will continue throughout your entire life. So basically everyone has this digital record
Yep.
of what you say, what you talk about, how you act, and those things like that. And then, of course, so that alone will add, some degree of perpetuity with what you say and do. And then certainly with the further advent of different types of computational approaches, those can be stitched together even more in different ways. So, you stitch together photos, you can stitch together the videos. You can tell from people's social media posts what their personalities are like, and those things like that. So it's an interesting time, but it also is fraught with some interesting challenges too.
Definitely, and it made me remind that the time that started to happen was when we start figuring out, maybe it was in the 2010, 12, something like that, where HR company post interview, they will go and, as part of the process, go and check your social media account to see if there was something embarrassing about you. And that's when people start realizing, whoops. And then there were cases when picture of kids. I remember there was a couple in France that were sued by the now teenager daughter, because apparently, she's been immortalized as she was growing up, and said, never give my consent to that. And so a lot of things happening. I think the difference here is, one thing is you do without realizing, and now you actually have the option to say, well, what happened to my digital legacy once, my physical me goes, right? Mm-hmm. And I have a quick example here of how sometimes you don't realize that. I was talking in Australia to a cybersecurity conference and covering it. And one of the talk was about this guy from the government that he had an experience where an older relative died, and they thought there was something going on. Maybe he was in touch with somebody that was scamming and asking for money, and they were not sure if there was still an open bank account somehow that the money was still funneling towards this person. So he had to pretty much take the responsibility for the family with the legal, with the lawyers, and pretty much go and research and hack the accounts and figure out what's going on. Now, that's the motive, but then it comes with a lot of situation where, do you want to know everything that you're going to find out once you go start somebody's computer, or when you go start somebody's social media, and where you draw the line between what is private or not? Like before, as you mentioned, could have been the box of, here's the box with the keys, the documents, and some pictures, maybe a medal from World War II.
Yep.
And that's it. That's what I know about, my grandfather per se. Mm-hmm. And now it's your life. Now, in this case, this person didn't even realize probably that he was leaving all these trails.
Yep.
But now you could do it on purpose. And you could say, I'm going to do this because then I want my AI to live forever, kind of like Highlander.
Yep. It reminds me of, the Star Trek, the original series. There was an episode where there was this leader of this world named Landru. Landro, I think Landro is the name. And he would sort of like govern the whole world and, tell them what to do. And there was supposedly peace, but he was very kind of aggressive on how he organized things. And then it turned out as a typical kind of Star Trek, Captain Kirk, Spock, then they kind of save the day. And then they reveal that Landru is actually a computer that basically took Landru who really existed years before, but like was long gone. And they basically used this guy's image and kind of, emotional imprints and behaviors to kind of mimic like an actual person. And in the penultimate scene, Captain Kirk reveals to some of the other people there, this is actually a computer that's running all you guys. And then, of course, he outfoxes the computer, as Captain Kirk does. And then that's the end. But that's interesting because you're talking about a TV show, once again, in the 60s that was quite prescient. They basically foresaw some of these interesting challenges. And so you could see where people potentially could use all the digital assets or whatever you want to call it of a person to recreate that person or keep that person going for a variety of different reasons. So yeah, interesting. What's the word that life often mimics fiction or what have you?
Yeah, it's fiction is stranger. Reality is stranger.
Reality is stranger than fiction. Yeah. So, no, there's definitely different possibilities. I mean, if you look at it, many times in forensics too, they try to use people's social media postings and those things to try to figure out what the person's motivations are, what they were doing, and those things like that. So that's common these days, and also because when people interface with technology, it's interesting. When people interface with technology, sometimes they're actually more open to talking about their true feelings than they are with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they look at the computer and they think of the computer, and especially now when you can actually interact with the computer, right? With different AI approaches, you feel like you're talking to someone, and that person can feel like a confidant, and then you're doing these things. Or social media, you don't think, all right, I'm going to put this photo of me funneling some beer on the social media platform. You think I'm just putting it on the computer, but you don't realize you're potentially sharing that with like 17 million people or whatever. You don't think about that, but So then there's all this stuff out about people, and it's interesting how it's actually can be used in the future.
Yeah, I think we are in a transitional period where we still think kind of pre-mass surveillance and social media and all of this, and even people like me and you that are always looking at technology and AI and I talk about social engineering all the time, which now we fake. You could pretend to be someone else, and it happened, and it's very realistic. But then you're sometimes, like you go in the store and you're like, there is probably camera all over the places looking at me. What am I doing? And if I'm holding, this piece of clothing a little too much, then am I gonna get an ad?
Yeah.
With a discount on it, because they're actually scouting everything that I do, and I'm like, yeah, obviously, technologically speaking, that's completely feasible, and it's probably happening, right? But we still think that we're living our life as private as we can. So going
I still
back,
remember I was writing an article about animals and different animals that were spreading not foodborne, but different types of outbreaks. There were outbreaks that were related to different animals. Some of these animals were very, very cute animals, but they, people caught bacteria, different types of pathogens from them.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wrote an article about farts, because there was some concern. This was during the pandemic, during the early parts of the pandemic. People were concerned about maybe catching COVID-19 through farts, and I was trying to explain that, well, that's the likelihood of that's probably pretty low. And then to do some background stuff, I did look at some of those things, and then I noticed that on YouTube, all these videos of animals farting were coming up in my feed. So obviously the algorithms were figuring out that, you know, you
Big
like
Brother.
animals and you like farts. So
Yeah.
here's what you really may really like. So
Yeah. And as much as they can not contextualize it before, now they can actually probably make some more correlation. Maybe realize that you did write an article about it, and maybe it wouldn't happen now because it's so much more advanced that it's probably truer to reality.
Yeah.
I think the big question here is when we talk about these things, it's inevitable how it's all about human psychology, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this relationship that the teenagers are building with friends that are chat robots, and people I think in Japan are already marrying legally some AI entity, and how you mentioned this thing that when you are talking to a computer, you feel like you can be even more open than when you're talking with your psychiatric doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how it just sounds so natural language now. Like I talk to ChatGPT on my walks. Sometimes I even do research while I walk the dogs, and I put my headset on and I'm like, all right, go find me information about this person that I'm going to interview or this topic that I'm interested in. And now you can interrupt it. And then you have these very, pauses and laugh and smiles and things that like these little details that it kind of make you forget that you are talking to an AI. And I get like, I'm like, bro, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you do that as well, or am I a little bit crazier than you?
Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about. No one does that now. Yeah. You see and hear and how people refer to ChatGPT or interact with ChatGPT. It's not like the way people talk about ChatGPT is like a person. Oh, I asked ChatGPT the other day. Oh, ChatGPT made a joke or told me like that. It's so there is that blurring of reality that is occurring more and more. And you may have seen these on one of the things that become quite more and more popular, like on YouTube and stuff like that, is people will create these AI generated movies, and they're looking more and more like real characters or real people or sometimes real actors. Like they'll say, oh, create a movie with such and such actor playing this role, like it's a new role that the actor never played. And then if you looked at it and you don't look at it carefully, you might think that it's that actor's actually playing that role. So the reality is getting more and more blurred, and it's only going to get more and more blurred over time because as things, I mean, you've obviously heard of the uncanny valley, right?
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite topic.
Yeah, and if you go back 10 years ago and look at some of the computer generated people and characters, stuff like that, the whole idea is it can look a little creepy, right? Because it's not it's real, but it's not really real. But that's gonna change over time.
Borderline. That's the uncanny valley. It's not when it's clearly not true.
Yeah.
Like you can tell, like old Godzilla movie, versus something that is like, I can tell it's not real, but it's scary, getting there, like that, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of starts feeling like that, and I think the time it's really the timetable. It's so much faster now than what it used to be. So here's the thing: like I can think about a lot of people from the past that I wouldn't mind to have a conversation AI with.
Mm-hmm.
Carl Sagan, maybe Asimov, just to stay in the sci-fi and and astronomy world. But why not Socrates, or why not have a conversation with somebody that has all this knowledge that we can collect? It probably wouldn't be the personality, but if you could then do this with somebody that has been into video interview and podcast and wrote book, I feel that it could probably get very, very close to that person. Would you want to have a conversation with someone that is an AI reproduced based on a real person?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because, and this is part of the larger question with AI. What's really actually under the hood? So, how much of that person is it really actually capturing? So, for instance, one example is, when you meet like a celebrity or something like that, that celebrity has a public face.
Yep.
But there's many situations where sometimes the public face is similar to the private face, but then there are also many, you hear many stories about how behind the scenes they're very different. They're not the same
I
person.
love that. That's a great point.
So does the AI algorithm or construct capture just that surface versus like what's actually deeper? If you think about it, what makes relationships, human to human relationships, really meaningful and deep? It's when you actually know the person very well, not just the superficial stuff. It's like when you've gone through all kinds of ups and downs, and you know what they're really like. And many times you revel in sort of the imperfections of people, right? When you interact, like, you don't necessarily want a perfect person around you. You want someone who's human. How much of that will be, the case with computational AI generated stuff? Like if you're going to have a conversation with, I don't know, Socrates. So at this point, any computer generated Socrates, I think, has a decent probability of being inaccurate, right? It's because we have a historical record, and that's how much we know about Socrates, and we know how history works, right? Probably did not capture. If I believe Instagram was not around with Socrates, but I'll have to double check on that.
No.
Yeah, I don't think he was in any TikToks. So we don't know what
it was. Insta sculpture at the time.
Just sculpture, yes. It was Tick Rock or something like that. Yeah. So whatever reconstruction of him is going to be based on limited historical record, which may be idealized or may not be. So I would say like an AI generated version of Socrates, probably less interested in that, because it's really going to be sort of a compendium of what's known about him historically. I mean, it might be interesting based on, something that's based on a historical record, how that would respond, but there's some limits.
Like, I can see, based on what you say, which make complete sense. It's you could use it as an educational tool. So you're studying philosophy, and all of a sudden you get to talk and ask questions directly to Plato and Socrates and other that, but is a tunnel knowledge, right? It's a specific silos knowledge based on their books and their education, and you're not, as to your point, you're not really talking to that person. That makes total sense. I think it could be different though if you could have access to their social media. I mean, our public figure, even if it's public, considering when we go to the store, it may not be our private life. I mean, we always wear different masks no matter what, right? Even if you're not the actors or the celebrity. But I think that with social media, and you could definitely get a much better picture than that, and than a Socrates, of course.
Yeah. No, I think that's gonna change, because again, our historical record, and just to start off the conversation today, our historical record is changing. You now have an actual more accurate and more extensive historical record of everyone, whether people like it or not. It's all there. It's been collected in many different ways. So yeah, I think if you were to generate a computer generated version of someone today or someone in the near future, it's going to be very different and from 1 years ago. So that would make things interesting.
And I think the question there is, well, I think when you want to really go into when we started all this series of conversation, what I call season 2 with you, is it was based on the Singularity is Nearer by Ray Kurzweil, where he talks about uploading your own brain. So it's not just a reconstruction, but it's actually you take your own brain, you put it on a computer, and that's you. And the question there is it really you? It's another you? So it gets really philosophical there. And in that case, it probably, if it was possible, which may be soon, would be ethically good to do. Would people want to do that? Would people want to talk to someone knowing that that person is really you, but it's not really you? Who is who?
Yep. So, I have another Star Trek reference for that.
There you go.
Because I have a Star Trek reference for almost anything. There was an episode in the original series again where so Captain Kirk and Nurse Chapel beamed down to this planet. Nurse Chapel used to be romantically involved with this guy. I believe his name was Dr. Roger Corby. And, along the way, they find out that one of the things that he's been doing is he's been creating these robots, replicas of people, and then basically transferring copies of people's consciousness into these robots. And the robots look like, so he created a robot version of Captain Kirk that had the same behaviors and all these things like that. And at the very end of the episode, the big penultimate scene is when it's revealed that Roger Corby himself, and I hope I'm getting the character's name, is a robot. And his consciousness was uploaded to it, and his original body was gone. And he was arguing to Captain Kirk and Nurse Chapel, it's really me. It's still me. And they were like, it's not you. And so again, 1960s, this was an interesting episode.
Black Mirror before Black Mirror.
Yeah.
Star Trek is the original Black Mirror.
Yeah.
That and the Twilight Zone, I think. But that is exactly what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
I love that. And I didn't know you were such a Star Trek encyclopedia. I
have watched I should watch all the original series episodes multiple times. Wow. I still watch the episodes, even though I know exactly how they're going to turn out, which doesn't make any sense because I know how it's going to turn out. Why am I watching this for a 10th time? But what's interesting is I think one of the things that one of the reasons why that series really subsequently, like when it first came out, it wasn't as popular, but it's become a cult classic, right? Because people realized that in many ways, the episodes captured or anticipated a lot of the trends that will occur in the future. And not only did they anticipate it, they also asked the more difficult ethical questions. Like, again, Roger Corby, he's got all the imprints. It's a robot. Is it really him? Like, if he can feel that way, et cetera, if the robot actually feels that he's Roger Corby, is it? Well, not really, because it's not the original. So then at what point? So, that's going to be an interesting question the closer one gets to those possibilities. Yeah.
Okay, so do you think is it still him, even if it's a reproduction?
Well, the argument in that Captain Kirk, and you've got to listen to what Captain Kirk says, was that no, because it's not the original person. It was, maybe all the imprints or something like that, but the original person passed away. And the argument was that the original person ethically may not have done all this stuff, right? But so the argument there is it's actually a different person, even though everything was copied. It's a different person, or not a person because it's a robot driven by AI imprints. So,
right.
Yep.
But then the question is, would AI ever become conscious and therefore make our own experience? His, her. I refer to ChatGPT as a her, even if the voice is a male. So that's kind of confusing there. I need to figure things out. But, and I think that's a big difference when you talk about what make us different from artificial intelligence or robotics or whatever, is that they lack that emotional experience creation, and they're just reproducing something that we have put in their system. But then there are the other one that talk about the fact that we don't even know how we build our own memories and feelings and neurons and all of that. So as the black box of AI keep evolving, the theory of many is that eventually would get to create emotion. But if it does that, then really is not the same person. It would be a completely different person based on you.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting because the responses that something that's AI driven depend heavily or completely on the actual algorithms and how they are devised, right? So if I devise an algorithm that says that, okay, I want to keep, devise in a way so that like anytime Marco asks this algorithm something, then I want to keep Marco happy, right? So basically, and you put in these things just like, be agreeable about everything. Okay, just say, for instance, you put in an algorithm, say this algorithm will be agreeable about everything. Well, then someone will say, oh, this is great. This algorithm agrees with me, everything. Oh, I feel so close to this artificial person or what have you. But then, like, at what point is the algorithm telling you stuff that's actually not good for you, but just keeps telling you, oh, you're great, everything's fantastic, you're great. That's just an example of how it can get complex, right? So you can feel I'm emotionally connected to this thing because this thing's making me feel good. And therefore I have stronger emotional connection. But a real person and a real relationship, when you talk about real friends, right? Real friends support you and stuff like that, but they also tell you when you're like, you're doing something that's bad for you, or you're doing something stupid. They'll say, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Or that's not smart and stuff like that. The algorithm may or may not do that. So it depends on how it's actually programmed, right? So
and that's the reason why we could connect to what we talked about at the beginning, that you wrote these articles, and I mentioned like that people are in a relationship with AI, they have friendship, they're open with them, and they feel they can marry this AI woman or man because it's probably is their dream ideal person, because it just says, yeah, you're great all the time.
Exactly,
It's something that does not happen with my wife at all.
Well, so it's interesting because people are different, right? There's some people who I want someone or something that's always agreeable with me, right? Because for whatever reason, ego reasons or things like that. And, that's personal choice, right? Whereas there's other people who feel, well, that would be kind of weird if someone agreed with me all the time. So, I think you're right that there are people that find this very attractive, that if something's agreeing with them or telling them how great they are all the time, they feel like this is what I want. This is the actual relationship that I want. And then therefore for them, AI or AI driven technology that will do that for them is very attractive and satisfy their definition of a relationship. Now, what's also another interesting thing is, this changed people's expectations of relationships, right? So over years, we're used to like, oh, well, everyone's going to have their, crotchety, difficult aspects, but you're used to it because, people are human, right? People are not perfect. But are we creating expectations of perfection, quote unquote perfection, that then people say, hey, I don't want to do with humans.
Mm-hmm.
They're too messy.
Yep.
They don't tell me what I want to hear all the time. Right. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting, and it's also one of the reasons why I think we see many times people are gravitating towards technology because it's just easier sometimes. Like, oh, I can just, I can call something up and, I can pull up a streaming service and just get whatever I want all the time. I don't actually have to like worry about not getting what I want.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Or there's, I was seeing something where people were talking about how that's one of the challenges with Instagram and social media, where people will glorify their relationships.
Yep.
On social media. So then everyone will think, oh my goodness, my relationship's not like that.
Yep.
Why can't it be like that? So, that it's all the same phenomenon where you're sort of changing expectations of what real life is supposed to be like. And, that has its perils, I think.
You always look back, and you made a really good point, and you always look back at how humans are still human, right? When we talk about social engineering, for example, we fall for the same trick. We're still motivated by prehistoric needs of or feeling like fears and being impulsive, and when you feel in danger you react in a certain way. And the people that they call it social engineering, and we think about that as a scam and phishing and all that kind of stuff. But social engineering existed from the beginning of time. Scam romance, it's just the scale of how we do things now that is different. And the reason why I'm saying this is because while you were talking about the perfect relationship and the perfect people, even before technology the way it is now, technology in terms of movies and magazines and so on. I mean, I remember even when Photoshop came up, and you find out that models were modified and they were not the real body, and was given this expectation of perfection that it didn't really exist. And then the magazines that tell the beautiful story, and people have been always falling in love with ideal things, except that now they believe they're real. I feel like that's the problem, because I can watch a movie and say, well, this was a great movie. It was a movie.
Yeah.
And one thing is walking away or playing a video game is like, oh, this is a great video game. And then when I turn it off, that was a video game. Now I'm back in my real world, and not expect that whatever I was flying or whatever happened in the movie, I need to expect it to happen. And I think that people have been starting to blur this difference. And that's especially as a teenagers, when you're not really clear. But I don't think it's just a teenager problem. I think it's a societal, a large issue.
That's one of the reasons why there was a shift in advertising about a decade ago, where people started realizing that social media influencers, it was the rise of the social media influencers. So you had a lot of companies realizing, hey, hold on a second, these people on social media can sell products as well. And the difference is, when you're watching a movie and TV, you expect an advertisement. You say, that's an advertisement.
Mm-hmm.
But then many times on social media, someone looks more kind of rough hewn, right? They're like, oh, I'm walking around, see my bathroom or see my car and stuff like that. So you just think it's just a person just going about his or her daily business.
Mm-hmm.
But there's many times they're selling something, right? And that's because companies recognize, hey, this person looks more just authentic. And therefore, if they kind of slip in, a soda or something like that, you think they're actually using that product, as opposed to elaborate commercial. So that's really was one of the big jumps in terms of
product placement in movies until it became illegal, or you need to declare it.
Yeah.
Smoking a cigarette or drinking a Coca-Cola was a very normal thing to do in the 60s or 70s. They were all paid.
Yep. Yep. So yeah, there is certainly more and more blurring of reality that's occurring, but you're absolutely right. None of this is new. Like these are not concepts that are new. These are not approaches and techniques that are new. What is different is, technology can allow things to happen faster and in a bigger scale, and also just kind of do things, just in a larger scale and in a more complex way. So it's using the same principles, but doing it in faster, more complex, larger scale.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the summary of a very complex conversation, a topic that it's never going to have the answer, I think. But if there is something that I have to say is, I think it's fine if people want to pretend and play, play kitchen or dolls, or pretend to be a chef on a game or a video game, or having a friend that is an AI, as long as they know that's not reality. Don't bring that to reality. And we've done that with book. I mean, you open a book, you read The Lord of the Ring. It's not at all of a sudden you're going to take this ring and become invisible when you put it on, and be pissed if it doesn't happen.
Yeah,
it's a movie. It's a story. It's a tale, and we had fairy tale for forever. And I think that's the problem. It's when you mix the two, and I think it could be, I don't know, maybe it is healthy. Maybe it is healthy to have an AI shrink or an AI best friend, again, as long as that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's it's interesting. These days, you hear people on opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, some people are like,
Always,
very enthusiastic about AI, and then some people think it's just like the worst thing ever. And there's like anti against it. And I think the truth is somewhere in between, right? So,
of course,
it's one of these things where we have to be, they're aware of the benefits and aware of the risks. And if the conversations, I think one of the problems is the conversations aren't always happening. Like, people aren't talking about these things, and there needs to be more conversations like that, like what we're having. That's a plug for our conversation. But yeah, they have to be having, so people understand and they can separate reality from fiction or what have you. So yeah, you're absolutely right. If something works for someone, no judgment, as long as they aren't hurting other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. And I think that applies also to if somebody wants to talk to their deceased friend or family member or celebrity or writer or whatever. It's just knowing that Captain Kirk said it. It's not really you.
Yep.
It's fun, it's great, but it's not really you. And that's probably is the answer. I mean,
yep.
You're just having a picture or a movie that you can watch and rewatch a million times, and maybe you get a good advice too, because maybe AI can definitely get the methodology of thinking of that person, and that's really cool, right?
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Real Bruce and Real Marco brought you a conversation about the Uncanny Valley.
Yep.
And it's not in a can. It's not a Campbell soup, and we're not paid sponsor for that. But Bruce, as usual, I enjoyed this conversation. We start with something and we don't really know where we're going, but I think we make sense. And I don't want to sound like your friend AI that tells you that you're good, but you're good. keep being yourself. I love it.
Why, thank you. Likewise.
All right. Well, let's keep meeting into this bar where, eventually one day somebody will walk in and we'll have other conversation with other people. So far, I hope everybody appreciate this. Stay tuned for the next one, and take care, subscribe, and see you soon. Thank you, Bruce.
Black Cloak provides concierge cybersecurity protection to corporate executives and high net worth individuals to protect against hacking, reputational loss, financial loss, and the impacts of a corporate data breach. Learn more at blackcloak.io.
This is a special announcement. We are heading to RSA Conference in San Francisco for our 11th years of coverage, April 28, May 1st.
And as always, we're bringing you keynotes, conversations with organizers, speakers, industry leaders, plus the latest insights from the world of cybersecurity.
And we'll reconnect with old friends, meet new ones, and of course, we want you and your company to join us.
We have a few spots left for full sponsorship and our on-location briefings. You can book yours now at itspmagazine.com/RSAC.
We're going.
And you're coming with us.